The next section here I call Learning from the Kyoto School, or learning from 30, almost 40 years of learning from Kyoto senseis. But no, not the Kyoto school you're thinking of. Not Kyodai no sensei, but Komatsudani Hoikuen sensei. So it's going to be at the other end of the philosopher's path, down by near Kiyomizu. There's a small temple called Komatsudani, and they have a Hoikuen. And much of what I know and much of what I've written about happened in that little temple. So here's how I got there. By the way, there's Komatsudani. And Yoshizawa, the priest and director of the temple, is retired, but he's still alive, and his son is now the director. So how did I end up at Komatsudani? So in 1981, I completed my PhD in anthropology and human development in Chicago. And the job I got was at an overseas program in Kyoto. And I enrolled my 4-year-old son in a yochien called Senzan Yochien. And his experience that year was so interesting and so much different than his experience the year before in a preschool in Chicago that I decided to change my research agenda. And from then on, and he's now 42, so since then I've been looking at Japanese preschools as that's been my research agenda, with the idea as an anthropologist that they're cultural in 2 ways. One, preschools can be a window on Japanese culture. Anthropologists always study in some community, some village, some institution. And I decided the preschool was more interesting than other institutions I've been looking at. But also they're cultural in the sense that preschools are given the charge of being a place where Japanese kids learn to be Japanese, American kids learn to be American, etc. So I decided, after a year in Kyoto, we moved to Hawaii, where I had a postdoc at the East West Center, and my sponsor, the Chinese anthropologist David Wu, was just back from studying the first generation of single children in China. So we decided to do a comparative study of Chinese and U.S. preschools from an anthropological perspective. But then we thought it's kind of strange to be studying Chinese and Japanese preschools from the U.S. without bringing the U.S. into the study. And I think that was an important contribution to the study, so we invited an American child development person, Dana Davidson, to join us. And that became eventually what we called a book, Preschool in 3 Cultures. So some 7 years after David Wu and I came up with this idea, we came out with this book. So here's how we got to that point. So we developed a research method which we called video-cued multivocal ethnography. Almost nobody calls it that. They sometimes call it the Preschool in 3 Cultures method, or just video-cued interviewing. But the way it works is we made videotapes. We decided we'd make a videotape of a more or less typical day in a preschool, hoikuen, in China, Japan, and the US. And right away, people are thinking, well, how could you claim that hoikuen is typical? Well, we don't claim that. No. So the idea was that the video would not be data. The video would be a cue. So usually anthropologists spend time in the field with people. They notice things, and then they say, tell me about that. So what we decided to do is use the video as a conversation starter, as a cue to get people talking. So we videotaped a day in a preschool. We reduced the tape to 20 minutes, because that's enough material to get people talking a long time. We then showed the video first to the classroom teacher, and we interviewed her. Then we showed it to her colleagues, and then we took it to other preschools around the country. And then we took the video we made at Komatsudani to the US and China, and we showed the Chinese and Japanese and American videos in Japan. So it became a virtual multinational, multicultural conversation where we had something like 600 people all talking about the same 3 20-minute videos. So rather than keep talking about it, let me show you what it looks like. So this is the courtyard at Komatsudani Hoikuen. It's just one of the temple buildings. The kids, like at most Hoikuen, arrive starting at 7 in the morning as they're dropped off by their working parents. And then the formal school day doesn't really start till about 9 with morning opening. But the first hour or two, as kids are arriving, kids are free to play inside and out. And at Komatsudani, when we were there, a lot of the 4 and 5-year-old girls would go to the nursery each morning and grab their favorite baby and take them out to play. So you see the girl coming down the steps with this baby. So here's how the method works. So we showed this in other scenes, but with this scene, we'd show it and we'd say, what do you think? And so when we showed it to when we showed it to Americans, they had this kind of concern. Well, the concern was, oh my God, someone's going to drop a baby. And aren't you worried you're going to get sued? And do the parents know what you're doing? So the American reactions tell us more about America than they do about Japan, right? But my colleague Dana Davidson asked the assistant director Higashino this: do you encourage? She thought, oh, I bet you do this because you're worried about kids not getting enough attention. But Higashino, the assistant director, said, no. Like, no, you idiot. No. The babies are so cute. They get plenty of attention. It's the older children for whom this activity is valuable. These older children in our era of low birth rates don't have younger siblings, and as a result, they lack opportunities to develop omoyari and to learn how to know and anticipate the needs of another. So this is an example of the method produced kinds of insights that we didn't already have going in. This taking care of babies wasn't necessarily common at Hoikuen across the country, but the logic is what was common. So the practice wasn't common, but this tatewari kyoiku, or older kids playing with younger kids, and especially this concern about omoyari with single children and families who have less social complexity, was what was the more common theme. So one more example. This is a scene that gets the most attention from the Preschool in Three Cultures book. This boy, this naughty boy Hiroki, I owe my career to him.
Boy in the yellow shirt, Satoshi.
So I'll just tell you what's happening here. So the boy in the yellow shirt, we call Satoshi, has taken his aluminum foil from lunch and made a shuriken, a little, as you do, right? And he's going to reach over to Hiroki in blue and say, look what I made, but Hiroki's going to step on his hand. The teacher's nearby, but doesn't do anything, but Midori to the rescue. And Midori takes Satoshi over to some other girls, and Midori had witnessed this, and she explains, Hiroki hit him and then stepped on his hand. And then the other girl, she says, right, isn't that what happened? And then the other girl says, that always happens when you play with Hiroki. If you don't want to get hurt, play with someone else next time. So we then showed this to the priest and director, Yoshizawa Hidenori, and he says, children's fighting isn't a problem. If there were no fights, now that would be a problem. The world of the Japanese child is becoming narrow. Hoikuen should be a place where young children in modern Japan experience a social complexity lacking in their everyday lives. We don't encourage children to fight, but if fights occur, well, that might be for the best. And the best thing we could do might be to not rush in to break them up. So let me stop here to make some observations about how this method works. You've now seen two of the scenes. So there's a couple of features of the video-cued ethnography. One, the videos work to get Japanese cultural insiders to think and talk about implicit beliefs and practices that that otherwise would not be easy to talk about. So the emphasis in the method is on privileging the voice of the insiders to the culture, the teachers and the directors. So we give them a chance to explain things that usually people don't ask them about. So in a sense, we're viewing them as kind of organic intellectuals in the Marxist sense, or as philosophers of practice in their field. And we define praxis as behavior plus intentionality. So if we just see the videos, we see behaviors. But we need to also show the videos to people and have them talk about why they're doing what they're doing before we would call it praxis. Because people could come up with all sorts of their own guesses about what's happening. But when we hear the explanation of the teachers, it becomes something else, not just behavior, but praxis. I also want to point out that we designed this method out of concern with some ethical and epistemological problems of anthropology. Most ethnographies are of just one other culture, which implicitly positions the culture being studied as exotic. Oh my gosh. And the culture of the anthropologist is the norm, and the culture you're studying is the exotic. But by putting 3 cultures, including our own, into the same study and having them all be studied through the same methods, it doesn't eliminate, but it more evens the playing field. Also by having 2 East Asian countries, China and Japan, in the study, we can break down this binary of East-West, which is so prevalent. Because it turns out China, I won't have time to show you this, but the Chinese preschools are no more like the Japanese preschools than they're like the American preschools. So it challenges binary thinking. The other feature of this method is ethnographies are usually conducted in just one place, and then there's a danger of generalizing to the whole country or to the culture. But for us, the one, Komatsudani was the place we made the video, but we showed the video in Hiroshima, Tokyo, Osaka. And when we showed the video in different places, in Yochien and Hoikuen, in richer and poorer neighborhoods, it's the responses of the people in those neighborhoods that helped us understand variability, what's more similar and what's argued about. So for instance, when we took the Komatsudani video to Yochien in Tokyo, they started out by being very critical. First of all, they said, "Why do you film in Kyoto? That's not the real Japan." Kyoto's, what do you mean? Well, Kyoto's unusual. It's too Buddhist, and there's a socialist tradition in the teachers' union. And so as they told us why Kyoto is a mistake, they were helping us understand some of the tensions in Japanese society. Have you heard those kinds of stereotypes? Should we have done it in Tokyo? No. That's not the real Japan either. When we showed Yochien people a Hoikuen video, they said, "Oh, Yochien and Hoikuen are totally different." And then they started telling us their versions of what's wrong with Hoikuen, and Hoikuen people, what's wrong with Yochien. So this complexity of intentions came out. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead here. One other thing we did is we showed I'm going to show you, it's what happens when we showed the people in Japan a videotape in the US. So this is in Honolulu in the US. What's happening here is the two boys were fighting over this shovel, and the teacher comes in and puts her hand on the shovel and stops the fight, and you could see this dialogue. So Billy says, I call him Jimmy, "I had it first and put it down for just 1 second, but you already had a turn and you grabbed it. I wasn't done." The teacher, "Instead of grabbing the shovel, could you tell Billy with words you were still playing with it? I told him I had it first. When you feel mad, what can you do instead of grabbing the block? I did ask him. No, you didn't. You just grabbed it. Wait, one of you needs to talk at a time so I can understand what you're saying. You should use words instead of fighting." So we showed this. This was at Senzan Yochien. I remember the first time I showed this. First, the American teacher said, "What I'm trying to do is to get them to use words. Instead of," that one didn't. The American teacher said, "I want them to use words instead of hitting. It's important that they learn to express their feelings verbally." But here's what the teachers at Senzan Yochien said. So that's what the American teacher said. Yagi sensei, sugoi, like, wow, amazing. But I was like, good tsugoi good or tsugoi bad? Well, talking so directly with such young children about their feelings. The teacher gets right in there and deals with the problem. Talking with children about disagreement seems a bit heavy. Kind of reminds me of marriage counseling. So with the preschool in three cultures, I've only shared the Japan part. There are whole treatments of the U.S. and China as well. But what I wanted to take away from this is that the insights in the Japan chapter all came not with ideas I brought to the field primarily, but instead from interviews we conducted with Fukui and Kumagai and Yoshizawa and other Japanese practitioners. And I used these interviews to introduce to non-Japanese readers Japanese emic concepts and cultural pedagogies, including notions like keijime, tatewari kyoiku, omoyari, amai. Did I get Japanese haiku right? I don't claim that I did. I do claim to have presented in my writings the voices and perspectives of Japanese practitioners, voices and perspectives that challenge non-Japanese readers' assumptions and expand their notions of what's possible and desirable to do with children.